Morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is preparedness. And we get to look at how do we prepare for the unexpected. I think it'll be an interesting conversation because we can plan and we can also develop ourselves to a place of presence and trust that will allow us to have positive responses to unexpected events. But anyway, we'll talk more in depth about it. But before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, any stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, energizing, electrifying, illuminating all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, lighting you up from the inside out. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together. Very, very softly, softly, softly. Rub your fingers against your palms. Feel the deliciousness of that sensation, the tickling and tingling of your palms and your fingertips, and allow yourselves to become present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So it is Labor Day, and it's the official end of summer. And when we get to celebrate all the workers, ourselves as workers and others as workers, and that doesn't particularly have to do with our topic, but I do want to talk about preparedness. What does it look like? Does it mean knowing how you're going to respond in any given circumstance? So a bunch of people cultivate a feeling of safety for themselves and in their lives by thinking of all the possible negatives that could happen. All the usually it's negatives. Usually when people are thinking of preparedness, they're not necessarily trying to prepare for wonderful things. They're typically trying to prepare for really what they would consider to be negative or disruptive kinds of events. And that can be a benefit to be thinking about, well, what if this happens? How will I contend with it? That's not always wasted effort. However, what happens for a lot of people is that they get very deeply entrenched in this disaster thinking. And good morning, Josie. So good to have you here. And peace and love be with you as well. Thank you. So yeah, so we approach, I think, well, what we're talking about is how we approach the unknown. And so many people, I think that many of us have, good afternoon, Pat, welcome, welcome. I think that many of us have a fear of the unknown. And as a result, we tend to project worry and fear into the future and try to make game plans for that future. Good morning, Jennifer. So good to have you here with us. But we're talking about Preparedness. And yes, there are some things that it makes sense to prepare for. Like if you know a hurricane is coming, and we actually had a hurricane here where I am. Good morning, Alexandra. Welcome. It's so good to have you here. Um, if you know that, for instance, a hurricane is coming, there are preparations to make for that possibility. You know, maybe you store water, maybe you have a generator, maybe you board up your windows, etc. You know, there are precautions to take, and I think that's really important and valuable and useful. And there are areas where uh, we can take the catastrophizing and projecting out into the future the worst possible scenario that can be easily taken to degrees of extreme that have us living in perpetual fear. And the preparations that we make may in some cases allay those fears, but I think in other cases they're a perpetuation and an expression of those fears. So what I wanted to talk about in terms of preparedness is not only ways that we can buffer ourselves against potential eventualities or possibilities, but to cultivate a sense of inner presence that allows us to be alert in a given moment, to be present and thereby responsive rather than reactive. And that perhaps that is the ultimate preparedness, because that enables us in a moment of emergency or unanticipated circumstances to respond, to be able to perceive what the bigger picture and what kind of action might be appropriate. So I'm not saying this is an either or, because for sure it's not. You know, there are things that we can do. Like, I guess if we buy health insurance, that's a way that we're trying to be prepared in case there's a medical emergency and the attendant expenses of that. If we have a retirement fund, we're preparing for, you know, when we are not going to be having income. If we have a homeowner's insurance, you know, in case something happened to our property, or car insurance, you know, there are ways that we prepare for things. And some of us can take that to an extreme where we project all these fears into the future, and rather than gaining some comfort from our preparations, we instead are living in perpetual fear. And fear is a killer. Fear is a killer of intelligence, I'm going to say, and as well as perception. You know, we've spoken multiple times about how when we're afraid, what happens is that there's actually a physiological shift where our vision narrows and our ability to perceive the whole dynamic or the whole picture becomes very limited. And so what can we do? Good morning, Rosalind. It's so good to have you here. So Rosalind says, hello, it's sad when rural properties got dropped from their home insurance because of high fire risk. Yes, so even when we think we're preparing, right, by getting insurance, for example, we can have an unanticipated uh, wrinkle, or more than a wrinkle, like the insurance company dropping us, for instance, because of high fire risk. It's ironic, right? We buy insurance because we're concerned about risk. And as soon as the risk is high, the insurance is no longer available, right? And that said, one of the things that we can do in those kinds of situations is we can build homes, for instance, that are not as likely to burn, right? There are materials that we can use to, like hemp, for instance, won't burn when you make hempcrete home, for example. And with a lot of the rebuilding in California, what I understand is that they're rebuilding in the same style of the homes that were burned, which is kind of foolish, right? When there are options to be building homes that are less susceptible to that ongoing and increasing danger, right? I think, to take your example a little further, I know that there are certain flood zones, and they're only going to get worse, and I think that people should be disincentivized from rebuilding in flood zones, because what's it going to do? We talk about the common good, especially right now with COVID, and talking about vaccines as something that is for the benefit of the whole, right? And we may or may not agree with that, but that's kind of the conversation. And when we look at insurances, the thing about insurance is that the more claims there are, the more the insurance prices are jacked up for everybody, right? And so when there are certain properties, like beachfront properties, that keep getting flooded, or riverside properties that keep getting flooded, as climate change accelerates, then there's an unequal, a disproportionate distribution of funds, right? If these same properties keep getting damaged again and again, who's subsidizing that? Everybody else that has insurance, right? So I think we get to look at, does it make sense to be able to keep rebuilding these properties in areas that are more vulnerable? So again, preparedness, we get to look at these things. There are going to be, as we're witnessing the changes of climate, there are going to be more weather events. There are going to be more areas that are flooded, that go underwater. And how do we prepare for that? What do we do in terms of development? I mean, I get the benefit of being on the water, living on the water. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And we get to be aware of the changes in our geography that are going to be brought about by climate change. It's just a matter of fact at this moment. And these crazy storms that we're experiencing in areas that we didn't experience them before, more extreme weather. It's just how things are right now. And hopefully we get to wake up and be active in the face of it, to be pushing legislation that protects our environment, that sequesters CO2 urgently, that moves us away from fossil fuels, for example. We're talking about preparedness for the future on a grand scale, on a global scale. I started reading a book that I'll probably be talking more about on other days, called They Knew. And there's a lawsuit called Juliana versus the United States. And it's 21 kids, they're not such kids anymore, that were suing the government for violating their right to health, happiness, liberty, health, happiness, because the government has been complicit in creating climate change. And this is a really, really, really fascinating book. It's talking about this legal case and what has been going on. And this is horrifying. Since the late 50s, the government knew that using fossil fuels was increasing CO2 in the atmosphere, and that increased CO2 in the atmosphere would impact climate and would change temperatures, would change weather patterns. And through each and every consecutive administration, all the presidents, all the governments have known since the 50s that we were on a path to destroying or radically altering our climate, and that it would result in flooding, and it would result in extreme weather and loss of life, loss of land, loss of nature, et cetera, et cetera. And still the government deliberately supported the propagation of fossil fuels through all kinds of subsidies, et cetera, et cetera. So, talk about preparedness. There was none. There was none. And what do we get to do in the face of some of these situations? Well, we might choose to live in places that might be a little bit more, a little bit less exposed, shall we say, to the shifts that are occurring. For one thing, maybe we don't get beachfront property because it could end up submerged. Maybe hello, Dennis. Happy Labor Day to you. Welcome, welcome. It's great to have you here today. We're talking about preparedness and all different levels of preparedness, and not just thinking about all the horrible things that could happen in the future and preparing for each and every one of those things, but also cultivating a sense of inner awareness, inner preparedness, by developing a place of presence so that we can respond appropriately to circumstances that arise in our lives. So I think that we get, and what that is talking about also is moving into a place of trust rather than living in fear. And so I think that the intention for preparedness, when we are setting ourselves up for the future, is to allay fear in a very great degree. And sometimes in considering our options, what happens is that we get stuck in that fear. And there are lots of things that we could be frightened about in terms of facing the unknown, or even facing what is. There are all kinds of things that we could be terrified about, and not be considered irrational to be terrified about those things. However, that renders us dysfunctional, and it renders us also malleable. It renders us malleable in that when people are frightened, they will often do things or agree to conditions that they would not otherwise agree to if they weren't fearful. And we know that the well, I was going to say, we know that the antidote to fear is love, and that may be. I would say that the antidote to fear is presence and alignment. That when we are aligned, if there is fear, we can use it as a tool to be informed. Like we have a deep, deep, deep emotional intelligence, and we can be aware of our emotion as a signal, as a message that perhaps some action needs to be taken, perhaps some adjustment needs to be made. And I think that what it comes down to is balance. Like we can look at potentials. Like I know people who create stores of food in preparation for the apocalypse, so to speak. That people store food and guns and I hope that that's not something that we are going to devolve to a need for. I hope that that's not, that we're not heading to such extreme circumstances. And we get to choose how we want to live in the face of potential threats, right? Potential possibilities, because there's always something that we can paralyze ourselves with. And some people use the preparation to feel like they don't have to be fearful anymore because they're prepared. The thing is that ultimately, I believe that our inner preparedness, our ability to be present, is our ultimate preparedness. Our ability to be responsive, because the likelihood is that there are going to be situations that arise that we never would have anticipated. I mean, I think that we're living through one of those situations now in many ways with COVID, right? And so many of us would not have imagined that we would be facing this kind of global challenge, right? And some of the ramifications of it are also things that we might not have anticipated. And certainly there are people that have anticipated this whole scenario and may or may not have been prepared for it, in one way or another. What do we do to prepare for it? So I think we get to read the writing on the wall, we get to be circumspect, and we get to be present to be able to see the bigger picture and be informed by that bigger picture, which that can then lead us into ways in which we might prepare ourselves. And I wonder for you, what are you feeling about this? Are you how do you deal with preparedness? Like what are you projecting possible situations in the future, and making preparations for those potentials, from anything as simple to having savings, or having some kind of nest egg, having health insurance, having property insurance. What kinds of things are you preparing for? I mean, one of the ways that we can prepare ourselves for the future is through knowledge and education, right? So for instance, I haven't dedicated myself to this, but I'm very curious, and I think it would be really powerful skills to be understanding more of foraging, nature's edibles and herbalism. Like I'm endlessly fascinated, and I haven't, as I said, yet dedicated my my energy and learning and attention to immersing myself more deeply in the world of nature's bounty. But there's so to me, it's a tremendous fascination, and it would enable me to be able to know that I could be well fed, regardless of the circumstance, to be in harmony and connection with nature. So what kinds of things are you looking at in your lives, that, like, what kinds of preparation do you make? Do you have a practice that helps you to become aligned and integrated and centered in presence? What do you respond to fear with preparation activity? I think it's worth looking at, because there's so many ways that we can focus our attention in life. We can be zoning out, we can be tuning in, we can be reading the news, we can be avoiding the news, we can be cultivating social support circles, we can be doing any number of things. So Rosalind says, oh, this is beautiful. Rosalind says, I have a wellness recovery kit for recovering at home. Remedies like having vitamin C, D, A, beginning with retinol, zinc, oil of oregano to make tea, Lugol's iodine, and NAC supplement. Awesome. Wow, this is awesome. Maybe, that might be something that you could put together in a PDF, and the way that you use these things, and who knows, you might be able to even sell that PDF to share, like, what your own home recovery, your wellness kit is. Of course, you'd have to have all kinds of caveats in there as to, your status as a medical or non-medical person, right? But that might be something that other people would have a big interest in. It sounds like you've done a lot of research. I know oil of oregano is super, super powerful in lots of different ways. I know all of what you've got there. I'm not sure what NAC is. Gloria, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I'm wondering, Rosalind, what is NAC? Anyway, so preparation, that's what we're talking about. And I think the ultimate preparation, as I said, is presence and alignment. Rosalind says, my friend is a naturopathic doctor. I'm happy to share it with you. NAC is for lung and liver support. Awesome. I'm fascinated, Rosalind. I think that would be wonderful. I'd love to know what's in there and the whys for the things that you've chosen. Sounds like a really cool preparedness kit, so to speak, given that we're talking about preparedness today. So yeah, I think we get to look at finding a balance. I guess that's really what everything is always about, isn't it? Finding a balance between maybe preparedness and obsession, right? Because we can easily find ourselves stuck in a place of fear and obsessing about potential possible futures, right? And we can find balance, like from a place of balance, we can make preparations that are peaceful. Awesome, Rosalind. I will. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Anyway, the idea, I think ultimately what we're looking at is balance. So balance between caution and fear. There's a difference. You know, we can be cautious in making reasonable preparations. Good morning, Catherine. So good to have you here with us. We've been talking about preparation, and part of that preparation, maybe one of the biggest parts, being finding inner alignment and a place of presence from which we can respond to the circumstances that life presents. And there are places for making, preparing for eventualities and possibilities. So I think with that, we will call it a morning. And it's such a joy to be with you. I so deeply appreciate this time together and your sharing. And yeah, it's really, really wonderful to be with you. And I wish you a wonderful Labor Day holiday if you're in the US. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network on the Facebook page, as well as the Facebook page for Enlightened World Living and EWN One with the Earth. And until next time, so much love and appreciation for you and to you. Take care.